Hi everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Unschooling to University. The book is out there, but sometimes it's just easier to sit down and watch a 1-hour quickie webinar of all the things I talk about in the book. So here we go. Thanks for joining us. So my name is Judy Arnall. I'm actually an education consultant. I've spent at least 22 years teaching child development and family communication. I am certified in the Brain Core Story, and I have a few other certifications in parenting programs. I am an advocate, absolute advocate of non-punitive parenting and hence non-punitive education. I've written 4 books now. My first one is a bestseller called Discipline Without Distress. It's all about solving family challenges and children's behavior with no punishments. Then parents said, well, what about the book about how we handle our anger before we get to positive parenting? So then I wrote a book called Parenting with Patience on handling parent-child anger and stress. Then I've written a book called Attachment Parenting Tips from Toddlers to Teens, which have absolutely no theory, no opinion. It is just 400 pages of tips for every common challenge imaginable. And I also have done a DVD called Plugged In Parenting on how to handle the technological challenges we face in parenting these days, in parenting the digital generation. A few of these books have been translated into other languages, and I also teach the Parent Effectiveness Training course for the University of Calgary Continuing Ed, and I've helped Alberta Health Services develop their terrific Toddlers curriculum in the past, and we're delivering that too. So I want to talk a little bit about the book, Unschooling to University. The book has been 10 years in the making. As my children got older in their unschooling journey, and a lot of their peers reached high schoolish age, or like 18 adult age, and decided what are they going to do with their lives, what direction they want to go to. So a few took some courses, a few challenged some exams, and 30 of them got accepted into the post-secondary institution of their choice. Over 20 of those 30 kids now have graduated in those institutions. A third went into STEM careers, a third went into humanities, and a third went into the arts. Now these are all friends of my kids or kids of my friends. And we all headed to the same life stage at the same time. And when that happened, I thought, this needs to get out there. People need to know about this, because a lot of times there's no statistics, no research, no evidence on the effectiveness of unschooling. There's definitely evidence out there for homeschooling, but not schooling outside of the whole educational system. So this is the book. It's a great book for family members who have questions. It's a great book for skeptics because evidence is in there. So when I talk about a team of 30, that's the 30 kids that I have focused on that are just in my circle. Now, if I know 30 kids who can unschool anywhere from 3 to 13 years in my circle, think of how many others are out there that you don't know about, and they are out there. So I'm just going to turn my camera off just because it chews up bandwidth. So there we go. Alrighty. So, and they have all kinds of ways that they got into post-secondary, anywhere from doing a formal diploma to just presenting grade 12 marks. And we'll talk about that as we go. So I also started a Canadian-wide association called Unschooling Canada to provide support, information, and advocacy. If you're watching this video on their website, that's one of the things that we do is provide information. I also have a blog called unschooling-to-university-book where I can post my thoughts that didn't quite make it into the book. So go there if you'd like some more interesting content on unschooling. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you're in the school system, if you're employed and this is interesting, challenging material for you, that's good. You're learning. That's the point. It's copyrighted 2019 with professional parenting, so it's really only intended for viewing. So we ask that you don't download it, distribute it, or share it. So when I present this to groups, obviously I can't do justice to all these topics. And today is kind of just a little summary. I'm just doing the highlights. There's much more information in the book and when I actually present to groups. And it's very learner-centered. I say, okay, which of these topics do you want to know more about? And we take it as we go. So I can't really do that in a webinar format, which is one-way delivery. So I will just touch on a little bit of everything, very small little nuggets to stimulate your thinking. Okay, so what's the problem? What do kids bring to school and when do they lose it? These are all the things children bring to school. Biggest up there is curiosity and passion. And somewhere between the ages of 5 and 15, they lose it. They lose their love of learning, their passion for what they want to know, and their curiosity, just for the sake of curiosity. In Alberta, our high school completion rate in 3 years is 70%. That means 30% of children do not get a high school diploma. Over 5 years, it's 20% do not ever come back and earn higher education marks and credits. And that to me is a real problem. I don't know any other industry where we lose 1/5 of our clients and say that's an acceptable rate. Now, the key to helping these kids become engaged in their education is self-directed learning. Now, that doesn't always mean it's self-taught, although very often it is. My self-directed kids, their whole life is that way. They don't like going to museums and being lectured to. They want to go and look their own way around museums. Same with traveling. They don't want to do tours. They want to go explore themselves. We are self-directed people. So the solution is engagement. And we have to keep in mind that our greatest obligation is to prepare our children for effectiveness in the world they'll inherit, not the world we have known. Education must change because our whole society and world has changed as children have all the knowledge they ever need at their fingertips in their phone. So what are the ways people learn today? Many ways. School is one of them, but they learn through people, experience, and reading, and definitely the internet. So basically there are 3 ways to get an education. There's school, there's home education, and there's unschooling. And education is not really called by where it takes place anymore. 20, 30 years ago, we thought, okay, home education is in the home. But now that school has encroached upon the home, it's no longer the case that it fits that definition. So the defining boundaries of education now is the control. Who controls it? Is it school controlled, parent controlled, or learner controlled? Pretend there's a buffet and your child is standing next to the buffet holding an open plate. Next to that child is a school principal. That is school. That school principal, the teachers, the curriculum developers, the government decides what foods go on that child's plate, in what order, and how much. The child has no input other than to take that plate away and eat it. In home education, the parent is standing beside the child and choosing from the buffet table for the child. In unschooling, the child determines what kind of food they will eat, how much of each food they will eat, in what order, and whether they come back for more. That is unschooling. It's child-directed education. So basically, unschooling is knowledge acquired on a need-to-know time frame, as determined by the learner. The child, for example, doesn't know they need to know the O Canada anthem until, like my daughter, she goes to Girl Guides and they're singing the anthem and she realizes she doesn't know it. So what does she do? She gets her motivation and she comes home and she looks up the words, the music, and teaches it to herself. So self-directed education is called different names. In a free school, it is called self-directed education. In a home, it's called unschooling. And I have the most respect for teachers. I think that has got to be one of the hardest jobs, besides parenting, of course. Both parents and teachers need a tip jar on their table because very often we do it most often for love, for the love of children, not so much for what we get paid, but we do it, we put the extra effort in because we want to see children succeed. So our story is, as I said before, I teach non-punitive parenting and non-punitive education. And I couldn't imagine putting my kids in a system where learning would be bribed or punished. But my partner didn't agree. He came from English schools and he thought the Canadian school system was just marvelous compared to what he had grown up in. And we had 2 English schools and 2 French immersion schools within a block of our house. He wanted to send our kids to school. So I said, okay, I'll indulge you. So we did. Our 2 oldest children started out in kindergarten in grade 1. And that's where I noticed things were changing. My kids came home from school and then they wanted to learn what they really wanted to learn. Like if you planted an egg, would it grow an egg tree? So more and more I was doing after schooling, teaching the kids what they really wanted to know while they were sitting in school 6 hours a day, not wanting to know what they were being taught. After that, I looked at them and I observed their love of learning for its own sake was disappearing. So, and my husband came home and told me that he was being placed overseas in a job for the next 2 years. And with 4 kids at home, I said, okay, we're going to do school my way. And we brought them home to homeschool. Well, by November that year, it wasn't working. School replicated at home was causing power struggles. The kids stopped listening to me because I'm just dear old mom. And I was doing way too much yelling. And I thought, this is bad, bad, bad. I had a baby and toddler underfoot. And I thought, why am I doing this? I could just send them to school and the teacher can yell at them all day. So more and more we let go of curriculum. We let go of our expectations and our outcomes. And we played. We played, we did projects, we had fun, we went places, we traveled. More and more we unschooled. And you can see by the math workbook, one of the kids wrote on there, I hate mathematics. That's actually my engineer who did that. And with my background in adult education is unschooling. It is all learner-centered. Compared to children, adults are treated much more differently, much more respectfully. We allow adults and empower them to direct their own learning. And I thought, why don't we extend that to children? So in the book, I discuss this in detail, how it can apply to children. So for the next 10 to 12 years, we just played. And in Alberta, you have to keep records. So I asked my kids, would you want to write the provincial achievement tests for grades 3, 6, and 9? They did, and they scored within pretty well acceptable and excellence in some areas. And it was interesting to know, I would keep records of what they were doing and how much they naturally gravitated to different topics and subject areas that really did align with the Alberta Programs of Study curriculum. Not that I led them there, but children's natural curiosity at that stage leads them there. Show me a child who doesn't want to play with magnets or splash with water in containers or go visit an airplane on a field trip. They love those things. So then as the kids reached their late teens, they became a little more focused and a little more interested in what they were going to do for the rest of their lives. They decided their directions and they plotted out how they were going to meet the hoops they had to jump through to get them. The first full day of school, depending on the child, was either grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, or right to first day university. And not that they stayed there, they stayed for anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, and then they came home and self-directed their high school again. In Alberta, they write diploma exams. My 4 children wrote 21 diploma exams with an average mark of 78%. Our provincial average is 65%. Their average mark of 78% rivaled the #1 private school in the province for that year. So unschooling works. The biggest benefit is that when kids go into preschool at 2 to 3 years old, they're in the system for 16 years of coerced education. They are burning out by grade 8. And those are the years, the high school years is when you want kids gearing up, not burning out. But unschooled children who have not had that structure, not had that coercion, they're gearing up when they start a formal program. It's new to them, it's exciting, and they are gung-ho to do it. So earlier, longer, and more academic education does not equate to a love of learning and educational attainment. Learners do not need 16 years of education to be successful. So the end of our story is I have 4 kids that were accepted to university so far. 3 of them were in STEM programs, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. 3 of them graduated so far. 1 of them is still there, and the youngest is self-directing his way through high school. Let's briefly look at the research. So there's 2 famous free schools where they practice self-directed education. There's the Sudbury schools and there's the Summerhill schools. And there's about 280 free schools worldwide that empower children to learn what they want to learn. The Fraser Institute has published 2 reports, 2007 and 2015, and all very, very good evidence. Although it's specifically not unschooling evidence, it's very good evidence for the whole continuum of home education, from unschooling to eclectic to unit-based to project-based to school replicated at home. All of it has very good outcomes. Here's some of the outcomes they found. That homeschoolers outperform both public and private students. There's no advantage if the parents are teachers. There's no problem if there's a low income in the family. Homeschool students are involved in 8 social activities outside the home, and they score high life satisfaction in what they're doing. It's obviously inexpensive for compared to the public system. Now, costs may be a barrier for some families, but definitely we don't spend what the system spends. And the best part is the primary models of behavior are adults rather than hordes of peers with no adults around. There's a lot of indirect evidence supporting unschooling too. Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences promotes it. Book learning is not the only way. Reginald Bibby, his research points that teens really love their parents. The EC Mapping Project promotes the fact that children need adults to talk to in serve and return interactions. Colby and Dale's model of learning promotes that we all learn in different ways, not necessarily through textbooks and online courses. Alfie Cohen's research into the effects of punishment and bribery on desire to learn. And everywhere, self-determination shows that if kids, learners have skin in the game, they're going to want to learn, they're motivated to learn. You don't teach anyone to learn. Babies are born learning, and we're the ones who school it out of them. Dr. Peter Gray's research, he has a PhD in psychology and he works out of the Boston College, but his research following 75 unschoolers showed that the least structured the education children had, so we're talking public school, private school, and even very structured homeschooling. The least kids had of that, the more likely they would be to go on and succeed at post-secondary schools. So the more years unschooling, the more they were successful in post-secondary. Now, children need more adults in play, as indicated by Peter Gray, Sir Ken Robinson, Pat Ferenga, and Gordon Neufeld. So where are they? Unschoolers comprise about 10% of homeschoolers, according to Patrick Ferenga. So there's a very small proportion out there compared to homeschoolers, but we're out there. And I like this. Everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And that really speaks to multiple intelligences. Okay, let's quickly look at brain development and learning and see how that fits with academic attainment. So babies are born with 100 billion brain cells, and for the most part, not a lot of them are connected. What happens in connection is that the axons and the dendrites reach out, and between them there's a gap. We call that a synapse. So when the brain is stimulated, the neurons send out a neurotransmitter to the neighboring axon or dendrite and cements a pathway. And the more the brain is stimulated in that particular area of the brain or that particular subject matter, the pathway strengthens until a child reaches the age of 7. And that's when it's not sustainable anymore for the brain. So the brain has to pick and choose. So then the things a child uses a lot, or knowledge or skills they use, those pathways thicken and the other ones get pruned. So the brain at age 15 becomes more efficient and powerful. Children develop in 4 areas: physical, cognitive, social, and emotional. So I'm not going to talk too much about babies because we all know what babies are like, and toddlers. They're so cute. But babies and toddlers learn most of what they need to know through their 5 senses. They are 3D learners, and that's why we say cut the screen time, because screen is 2-dimensional. Young children learn through 3-dimensional experiences, and a lot of it involves tasting. Everything goes in their mouth. So, but preschoolers around age 3 to 5, they're starting to think a little bit more, question. Their imagination is growing by leaps and bounds. So to be quick, the brain grows from the bottom to the top and from the back to the front. The prefrontal cortex is the last part to develop. And in infants, the brainstem is the most sensitive to develop at that age. So preschoolers are more here. They're developing the back of the brain more. They're thinking, they're questioning, they're imagining. But they're still very limited in executive function, which is that frontal part of the brain right here. So they have a short attention span. And if you ask a child under 6 to do something, 60% of the time, they're not going to listen to you and they're not going to do it. And that is a development issue, not a discipline issue. So that's why formal mandatory school doesn't start until age 6 or 7, because their self-control is very, very limited. If you ask anybody, can a 3-year-old play chess? Most people will say no, except the odd 3-year-old that's a prodigy. But for the most part, 3-year-olds can't play chess. But 7-year-olds can play chess. And here is why. This is a 3-year-old's executive function ability, and this is a 7-year-old's executive function ability. Whoa, look at that difference right there. Big, big leap there. And the next yellow bar, you can see another big leap from age 13 to final finishing of the brain there at age 25. So 2 huge leaps in executive function. Now, playing chess requires all 4 components of that executive function. Children need working memory to remember which way each piece moves. They need focus in order to plan their next move. They need self-control, that ability to take turns and wait for your partner to take their turn. And they need planning. So when their pieces get confiscated, they can come up to plan B and figure out what their next move would be. 3-year-olds don't have it. 7-year-olds starting to get it really good. Okay. So preschoolers, again, they learn through 5 stages or 5 senses. School-agers, now they're formulating, most of this brain is developing here before puberty. They're starting to think logically, concretely, and tangible. And if you ask them to do something, 60% of the time they'll comply. 40% they won't. But the great thing is, this is why logical consequences are applied now to children, because they have the ability to think, if I do this and this will happen, but if I do this and that will happen. Preschoolers do not have that ability. But they can't really think abstractly yet until puberty hits. So everything they learn and everything in the elementary school curriculum is geared to something concrete and tangible in that child's life. Planes, wetlands, magnets, boats, animals, colors, all those things that children can see and experience physically. And by the late school agers, they tend to be growing out of toys and becoming a bit more peer focused. A lot of children that are unschooling around age 13 want to see peers more on a daily basis and want to go back to school. But the school age years are still primary years to learn through 5 senses: hearing, seeing, touching, smelling. They don't taste things or put them in their mouths anymore, but they talk. So the more they can experientially learn, the better. Still, the most convenient way to deliver curriculum in schools is through textbooks and workbooks. However, kids this age still don't learn that way. They learn best through 3D action, movement, body, and experiencing things. So here's an example. A lot of unschoolers have trouble learning math. And let's talk about math, because they don't have trouble learning math at all, but we worry that they have trouble learning math. So math is experiential. It's all around us everywhere. And I suggest when kids are heading toward a STEM career, they might want to start doing a more structured math program in grade 8. And then people say to me, well, how can they start at grade 8? What about grades 1 to 8? Well, they learn math grades 1 to 8 through play and interacting with the world. They do not need textbooks and workbooks to learn math. Then around grades 8 to 12, that's when they start to apply that experiential learning to paper. And that's when they start figuring out how to add fractions on paper, once they have that physical experience of adding fractions. So all of these things can be learned through play. Greatest common multiples, you can learn it through buying hamburger buns for a picnic. Fractions, decimals, percents, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Go shopping. There you go. Estimation, perimeter, area, volume. You can learn all that through going to the post office with Christmas packages. You can learn it through renovating a room, buying carpet. There's lots of ways. Least common factors, integers, and algebra. A lot of that my kids learn through watching the weather or playing video games. Variables, place value, same thing, through just experiencing life and coming up with solutions to their real life problems. Place value is kind of like learning phonics. It just comes. Kids get it. Coordinates and ordered pairs through battleship. Angles, properties, rounding. Rounding is through shopping. Angles through renovating. Degrees and temperature, weather, time and Roman numerals. My kids learn that through reading asterisks and obelix books. Reading graphs, pie charts, and figures, pretty easy to figure out. Same with even and odd numbers when you go traveling. Geometric solids, turns, rolls and flips, symmetry, perfect squares are all learned through playing with Lego or games like Blocus, or just as simple as formatting your pictures on the internet. So kids learn this, they just don't learn it through workbooks and textbooks. Now, again, like I said, at age 13, then they get their abstract thinking skills. They can learn about theory and concepts that are not tangible, can't touch them, but they're out there. These are things to learn then, but only if they're going to a STEM career. Now, teenagers, a lot of unschooling friends of mine, we really discovered that the late 16 to 18 years is when kids have a more focus on what they want to do. And if that means they're willing to jump through some hoops to get the courses, the grade 12 courses they need, the better. And again, many teenagers still learn through 5 senses, but they're now ready for paperwork too. So again, back to multiple intelligences, Howard Gardner says that people have our own way of learning. For me, I learn spatially. I learn so much more through pictures and movies than I do through books. And we all have our own special intelligences. I really like this quote from John Hoffman. Overplaying the brain development learning concept runs a risk of pushing adults to manage or control play, both counterproductive to free play, which is supposed to be spontaneous, unpredictable, and at times seemingly pointless. Something grown-ups should leave be as much as possible. Adults' role is to supervise to keep us safe, supply some of the materials, and participate when we are asked. That's it. If it ain't fun, it ain't play. And that's true. Play is free, spontaneous, unstructured, totally child-driven, totally. So let's explain this. So unschooling is play. It's a philosophy and lifestyle of education freedom in which a child's natural curiosity and motivation, nurtured in a rich and stimulating environment, will lead the child to learn what he or she needs to know in the time frame he or she needs it. Simple. They will do it. We just have to trust it. And according to children, learning engagement, they want relationships. They want learning relevant to what they need. They want to spend time on learning what they want to learn. They want to play. They want choices in how they play. They want challenge, and they want to fit in the real world. They absolutely do. Okay, I'm not going to talk about this because this is more Alberta. Okay, in Alberta and quite a few provinces, there is 2 program types of education in the home. There's parent-controlled, and that's where you unschool, or there's distance education, and that is delivered, directed, controlled by the school. That is not controlled by the learner or the parent. Unschooling goes by many names. Here are some of them. I'm not going to read those out, but there's quite a few. Now, some things. Unschooling is self-directed learning, but the child determines the pace, the content, the delivery, the time, and the assessment. They decide how deep they go, how wide they go, or if they go. It's facilitator attentiveness to what the child needs. Obviously, a 6-year-old can't get welding supplies. They need a facilitator who's the parent to get that. It is determined totally by the child. The child may indicate a desire for structured activities, maybe textbooks, courses, tutoring, or they may be totally unstructured activities, playing video games all day. It's what the child determines. No one else, just the child or the learner. If there are any motivation problems, it is not self-directed learning, and it is not unschooling. Unschooling is not homeschooling, which tends to be school replicated at home. Although by law, unschooling is most easily undertaken at home with the least government interference and is governed by home education regulations by most provinces. Unschooling is not permissive. A parent or adult acts as an attentive mentor or facilitator that provides resources for the learner when they indicate interest. Permissiveness is inattentive neglect. And the parenting style of an unschooler is right here in that collaborative part of the green square. Not the authoritative, but the collaborative. And it is a very valid parenting style. And unschooling is not well researched yet. Most unschoolers detest the whole idea of standardized testing, knowing and believing, as many teachers do, that testing does not assess the full range of intelligences, capabilities, and evaluation of the whole learner. Thus, the measurement of how unschoolers compare to schoolers is largely unstudied, except for my team of 30. And unschooling is not uneducated. Children who unschool learn as much or more as children in structured learning environments, but they have the opportunity to go deep into subject areas rather than wide. And their learning sticks because they are intrinsically motivated. It doesn't leave their brain under summer learning loss the next year. How do you unschool? Easy. You need 3 things. You need plenty of unstructured time, you need resources, and you need a facilitator that can help them get resources they can't get. Now, I would say you don't need all this right away. A library card and internet is basics. You know, you can get a lot of things off the internet. You can keep children busy with a lot of things you can borrow from libraries, toy libraries. What do kids do all day if they account for their time? They read, they look things up on the internet that they're interested in, they play a lot. They have puppet theaters, they play outside with friends, they go on sleepovers, they may do more formal things like Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, church groups, junior forest wardens. They play games, they do chores, they go on field trips to the science center, the zoo, the museums, they travel, they cook, they make things, they do projects, they volunteer, and I can't read the bottom one though. Anyways, they are busy, very, very busy. I kind of like Alberta because we only have, the children in Alberta do not have to follow the provincial curriculum, and because the parents have the right to determine the kind of education their children will receive. We have 20 very flexible outcomes, and I presented at a teachers conference one time, and I asked the teachers to slot Minecraft into all of these. They did. So pretty well. Children have to meet these by the time they turn 20. So they have lots of years to do it and lots of ways to do it. Some parents ask, what about music? What about language though? I remember I took music lessons because my parents forced me, and I'm so glad I did now because I can play the piano. Well, yeah, maybe there are those people out there, but there are also those people out there who said, I quit piano lessons as soon as my parents let me, and I hated it. So guaranteed, if anybody wants to learn anything at any time, they can. The brain is still active at 85 years old. You want to learn a language, then you can. Absolutely. My own experience is that, yes, I jumped on that parenting peer pressure, and I got my kids music lessons at age 6 and 7 because they showed interest in teaching themselves piano, and their interest, just like at school, their interest waned. They started complaining. They didn't want to go to lessons anymore. They didn't want to practice. It was a waste of time and money. And then I said, okay, that's it. We're going to drop this until you ask me 3 times. Well, that time didn't come until the kids were 16, 17, 18. That's when they asked me 3 times, piano, violin, and guitar. I just wrote the checks, drove them to lessons. They did all the ownership of learning music. Same with language. My kids started off in French immersion, didn't do well, pulled them out to homeschool, and yet most of their language learning occurred at age 18 and up, when they were in university and when they were traveling. They learned French, Japanese, and German, and Latin, just because they were motivated and they wanted to. Okay, I'm going to go through this really quick. 7 reasons digital children need adults more than school. This is Gordon Neufeld, and he promotes the idea of attachment even through the school age years. We think of attachment as babies, toddlers, but kids need attachment through their whole childhood. So the 7 C's are curiosity. Children are born learners. We're never not learning, and adults can squash or protect it. Caring. Adults tend to be more caring than peers. Absolutely. Strong attachments are not something children should grow out of. As according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, relationships with others are right there next to survival and security. Bullying. Kids who are protected from bullying grow up strong and straight and able to withstand the winds, whereas a child who is not protected is like the gnarled, bent-over tree who can't stand up to those strong winds because they've been battered through so many exposures to bullying. The less bullying kids are exposed to, and all kids are exposed to some, but the less the better. They don't need bullying. Bullying causes stress, and when it's ongoing, it's toxic stress, and that impacts brain architecture development. Creativity, taking risks and celebrating mistakes. Children need to hear that failure is good for learning. Competencies. Some things kids need critical thinking skills. They can model them after parents. I really think that finances, child development, and cooking should be mandatory learning things because we all do it. Context. Children, yes, they have all the information on their fingertips in their phone, but they're lacking that adult connections. And when they have an adult around, they can ask questions any time of day. That's good. Same with people skills. In school, the focus is reading and writing because they have to deliver to 30 kids. In unschooling, the focus is on speaking and listening as much as reading and writing. And all four are what we need for people skills. And community. We don't need just a school community. We need a whole life community. Okay, benefits of unschooling. In the book, I outlined 61 benefits. I can't go through them all here, but at least 23 are academic, 11 emotional, 16 social benefits, 6 physical benefits for the learner, and 5 societal benefits. There are lots of benefits of unschooling. There's lots of advantages and a few disadvantages. Interests erupt at inconvenient times. Cost may be a barrier for some families, especially childcare. Learning is somewhat invisible and difficult to measure, and it's difficult to trust the dry spells between learning spurts. Because there's not a whole lot of output in unschooling, such as written essays, test marks, it's very difficult to trust the evidence of learning. But anyone who spends time with an unschooler knows it's there. What are some differences between unschooling and school? Well, unschooling is play. Okay, play is one of the UN's rights of the child, and there's not a whole lot of play in school once you get past kindergarten. There's a lot of barriers to play. These are some of them. Lack of resources. Parents feel time is better spent in other activities. Schools are more academic focused than play focused. There's a perceived competition for university. Passive play such as screens take away three-dimensional play. And there's a fear of liability. You can't even play dodgeball or build school forts anymore in school because of liability issues. The consequences of not playing, though, are an increased incidence of anxiety, depression, suicide, helplessness, narcissism in children, teens, and young adults. And we're talking free play, not organized play, not lessons, not sports, games, but just free, spontaneous play. It helps children relieve stress, and it is a huge source of learning. Even preschool, only half of Canada's children go to a formal preschool. And yet our PISA results are really, really good. This includes homeschoolers too. Canada is at least in the top 10 in math, reading, and science. The benefit of unschooling is that the child is of the most concern, number one concern. It's my personal opinion and experience that in schools, funding is the number one consideration when any requests are made. It's not the child's best interest. It tends to be, well, I'm not getting funded for this. Register them next year. So it is a huge consideration, but in home and unschooling, the child is number one because we do it for love. There's a difference between unschooling and some self-directed learning in government-funded schools. In government-funded schools, they still have to follow the government curriculum. In unschooling, we don't have to. So, our former Minister of Education, Dave Hancock, said, teachers must give up being the sage on the stage to be the guide on the side. So the role of a teacher is, for the parent, is not the teacher, it's a facilitator. So You can, if your children want to know how to access resources, you can show them, you can answer questions, you can offer resources, you can model curiosity, you can observe children and help them make connections. You can let them be bored. That's such a great impetus for curiosity and creativity. Make them time so that they can have their interests and seek support for your confidence. Now, our curriculum, grades 1 to 9, came in a little blue box called GameCube because we were unschoolers. But the odd time I did do science experiments, I took them to a special activity. My kids, before age 12, they didn't remember anything. None of that. They didn't remember their childhood friends, our homeschooling groups, none of that. I'm sure it helped to build their brains, but I was under the impression that, you know, you zip up, open the brain, and you pour all this content in and it stays there. Doesn't. So how does the school model work versus the unschooling model? If you're a teacher, it's different than what you're used to. In traditional school education, the teacher studies the learning outcomes, they plan lessons, they deliver, then they evaluate, and then they report the learning outcomes met to the government. In unschooling, it's reversed. The child plays, and then the facilitator observes, decides which learning outcomes are touched on and records, and then reports learning outcomes met, without the child even knowing, because if they know, then it interrupts and interferes with the play. We have to do an education plan in Alberta, and this is what we do. It's 1 to a half a page, or I should say a half a page to 1 page. Our philosophical goals, the resources we're going to use, and how we assess. And observation, photographs, discussion notes are usually our biggest form of assessment. Mostly photographs, because if the kids are doing something like a puppet show, I'm going to take a photograph anyways. That's parenting. So it's much different. We do not follow learning outcomes. We play, we live, and then we can slot those into learning outcomes. Oops, okay. What about university? Next common question besides socialization. There are 14 ways to get into university. I outline them in a whole chapter in the book, but basically what we do is we meet the outcomes for the grade 12 courses required. You don't need a diploma to get to university generally, but I advise everyone to check the regulations of the institution your child's considering. But probably the easiest way is just to get those grade 12 course marks and credits and apply with 5 of those, like English, math, social, biochem, physics, or a language. 5 of those will get you into most university programs. If you don't want to do that, what a lot of unschoolers do is they enroll in a community college. They get really good marks because they haven't shunned learning. They have learned a lot. And then they transfer to a program of their choice at university or college. Okay, let's look at common concerns. Societal myths. Learners need teachers more than facilitators. No, learners can teach themselves. Children need adults to occupy their time, only if we condition them to that, but no, they don't. They're junk resources and education resources? No, everything's a learning resource. Learning and socialization can only occur in school? No, it occurs in life. Play is frivolous and time-wasting? No, play is educational. Earlier education and more of it is good? Nope. Kids won't learn a work ethic if not trained early? Nope. Kids won't learn the basics? Nope. Kids have too much power. Kids already own the power of their education. It's a myth that we think we own it, but they do. They choose how they learn, what they learn, if they learn certain topics. And you can't force a child to learn, and you can't stop a child from learning. Sometimes we say, well, if I hate my work, then you have to hate school. Well, let's both not hate it. Then you say, sometimes you just have to do things. Well, yeah, that's good parenting, but shouldn't have to be in education. We need to teach children a work ethic. That is developmentally developed. I used to worry, believe me, when my teens would sleep till 2 p.m. And I think, oh my gosh, I should get them used to getting up early because someday they'll have to have a job. And it's that snowball thinking that we do in parenting. When I tell parents of toddlers, don't worry, you see your toddler hitting now, but they're not going to be hitting at 15. Well, that parent is just horrified that their toddler is going to grow into that 15-year-old and still hit. But they don't take into account brain development of different stages. And same with a work ethic. When kids need to get up at 8 o'clock, in 3 days, they adjust. They learn a new schedule. They do it. They do it when they have to do it. We do not have to teach kids organizational skills. We do not have to teach them discipline skills. We do not have to teach them how to get up early, how to do any of those things until they need to do it and they're motivated to learn how to do it. And it will happen. Oh, I just said this slide. Okay. Absolutely. They're life skills. Will there be gaps in their education? Yes, of course there will be. But so will a child in school. When you think of all the countries in the world that a child could study, schools get to pick a few. As a child will pick a few as they self-teach themselves. So nobody in the world can know everything about everything. Nobody. So they have to pick and choose just as schools do. So will there be gaps? Yes, but not any more than schools. And when you think, how many adults can factor polynomial today? We all took it in junior high school, but how many of us use it on a daily basis? We leave high school, we specialize, the brain prunes those pathways, and if we want to learn it again, we can pick it up, absolutely. The same with children, they can pick it up too. And when you think about it, how many of us had formal lessons in sexuality? No, but we learn it. What about math? Again, I said grade 8 is a good time if your children are going into STEM careers to go more math on paper than math in the head. I think I talked about this already. I did. Okay. Reading, again, we live in such a literate society. It's really difficult that kids would not learn how to read and write. They want to. They're motivated to. So my kids read anywhere from 4 until age 10. That's when they read. And again, like toilet training, it just occurs. It's developmentally programmed in each child. Same with writing. Writing happens because of reading, and it occurs from a place of a passion to say something. Science and social best learned through field trips, travel, volunteer work. It's 3-dimensional learning. Now, how do you ease your anxiety? Keep a learning journal. Either keep photographs of what your children do, find support networks, read books, magazines, websites, talk to other unschoolers. But most important, keep photographs because it's amazing. You'll sit down at the end of the year and go, wow, they did this, they did this, they did this. And it's your school's job to translate that into their outcomes because you don't get paid to do it. But it just shows you how much children learn outside of a formal structure. I think I've already talked about advantages and disadvantages. Will my child be socialized? Of course. Forced association is not socialization, and social skills are more than finding friends. It's about being a good person, interacting with people of all kinds, ages, genders. There is diversity in unschooling. It is not a closed, contained system like a school. Unschoolers are out in the community, and it is more nurturing environment because there's a lot more adults around. Last section, what do they play video games all day? Here's the good news. They learn a lot through video games: cooperation, commitment, teamwork, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and innovation. Wow. Yes. And everybody worries about video game addiction. When you have a lifestyle where kids have hours and hours of unstructured time and they want to play that iPad or the Fortnite or whatever computer phone game they're on, then that's okay. They learn through games as long as they're getting some exercise and they're eating meals and doing what they have to do. If they can pull off and do what they have to do. Now, I'm just warning you, my parent education hat, when games are compelling, they will grumble when they're pulled off to do what they have to do. But as their executive function matures, so, around 17, 18, they're not grumbling anymore. They know what they have to do and they go do it. So they may play video games but think, oh, I have to study for a test tomorrow, so I'm going to put that on hold and go study. They get that self-control. They have that plan B flexibility, and they have the focus. So most kids are not video game addicted, no matter how much game time they play. When people are addicted, they often have high ACEs, adverse childhood experiences during their childhood. That can increase the risk of addictions, not the amount of time they spend playing video games. And there's many benefits of the internet. Kids are researching things all the time. They're learning to read, to write, communicate, look things up. And there's benefits of gaming, as I said. Critical thinking, that development of that prefrontal cortex, and information management under time constraints, literacy skills, pattern recognition, math operations, they all learn that through gaming. As I said, I gave this to Teachers Convention. I said, okay, what can kids learn from playing Minecraft, from playing with Lego, from playing Settlers of Catan? And they could all fill it out. I've also done one with video games. And Mary Gold did a little poem called If You Give a Kid a Nintendo, modeled after If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, and all the things kids learn. And here are just some of our artwork and projects our kids made from playing video games. They played Kirby and Super Smash Brothers and World of Warcraft. And they did ceramics, they did sewing, they made puppets, they made costumes, they made stories, boxes and boxes of storybooks and artwork. And that's how they manifested their video games into output. Lots of things here. Yeah. So I would say, instead of asking how to get your boys off the games, ask how to get your girls on the games, because it really fine-tunes that prefrontal cortex. And of course, we need a girl-friendly gaming arena. Life skill benefits of gaming. It helps kids zone out and relax, teaches delayed gratification, teaches focusing, builds self-confidence, and provides a source in emotional intelligence. Socializing. Kids socialize. And I would say the benefits are, now that my kids are in different countries, different provinces, different cities, they all can get together and socialize over game platforms. And it's so nice because when kids homeschool and unschool, they grow up very close and they can stay close. As long as they have a bit of a balanced life, they still need that exercise. Okay, so that's our conclusion. Can play replace school? Absolutely, yes, it can. You can pretty well just bypass that whole education system, and you can write the SAT exams, well, not you, your kids. They can write the SATs or their provincial leaving exams and head right on to the post-secondary institution they choose. And I will end with my favorite poem, Play. I tried to teach my child with words. They often passed him by unheard. I tried to teach my child with books. He only gave me puzzled looks. Despairingly, I turned aside. How can I teach this child? I cried. Into my hand he placed the key. Come, he said, and play with me. And that's by Anonymous. Just turn this. Okay, so this is a recording, so we don't have Q&A this time, but I want to thank you for joining me on this session. Please keep in touch if you want to discuss the book. It's 384 pages of discussion. We can talk about the benefits and challenges. Anyways, follow us at the blog, unschooling-to-university.com. You can join our Unschooling to University Facebook page. We have a group called Unschooling STEM, and you can buy the book on Amazon. And if you want to contact me for speaking, I'm at professionalparenting.ca. So thank you so much, and I hope this was helpful, and I welcome feedback too. If you have parts that you would like me to elaborate more on, I would be welcome to. So take care and happy unschooling.